Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about how the Barbie movie 2023 disappointed me. The execution of the message I find issues with. And don't get me wrong, I think this was a well-made movie. You can tell a lot of time, energy, and effort went into the costume design, the world building for the Barbie world. So many other factors. I just feel like one of the most important parts or one of the most crucial parts to the movie was kind of left by the wayside because it didn't feel as though it was a fully thought out idea. Throughout this movie, it covers a lot of topics. It covers feminism, masculinity, femininity, existentialism, all these topics, but none of them are fully fleshed out. None of them really try to expand or even try to really cover these topics properly. And although I know a lot of these topics that were brought up could go hand in hand together, I think the flow of how these topics were integrated was so disconnected. So let me go over some of the themes and topics I saw be brought up and why in the movie it doesn't make sense narratively. It doesn't really connect. For example, Barbie at the end of the movie makes the decision to become a woman, kind of trying to hit home the point that life as a woman, although it can be hard and difficult, it's still a life worth living. That's what I got from it. But throughout the entirety of the movie, before, during, or after her going to the real world, you never see her experience some of the more positive attributes of being a woman in the world. Before she goes to the real world, she experiences thoughts of death, existentialism. During the real world, she is sexually harassed, she is catcalled, she is placed in jail where she is sexualized by police officers, she is yelled at by teenagers. She goes to Mattel thinking that that's going to be a safe space for her, and then ends up almost being trapped, and then until she feels like something's wrong, and then she escapes. And then once she gets back to the real world, and she realizes that these real world things, patriarchy, come back with her through kin, she is kicked out of her home. She kind of loses herself, like she loses her motivation, like she doesn't feel as powerful as she wants. She did to go through all that and never not once did they really show a moment except one scene throughout the entirety of the movie of her experiencing womanhood positively. And that was the bus scene with the older woman. I absolutely adore that scene. That scene is close to my heart. I think it really connected with me because it reminded me of women in my life. And I think if the movie had used more scenes like that to kind of connect to Barbie and show that although it can be a tough experience, it's not one that's not worth living, I think that would have really hit the message home. But they didn't do that. And then at the end, when she makes the decision to become a woman, she makes this decision by experiencing things that she didn't experience. Like it's like a clip show of things that other women have experienced, but she didn't experience them. I wish the movie would have tried to incorporate more scenes of her experiencing positive things, like the bus scene, scenes where people help her out, scenes where she feels beautiful and empowered. And these don't even have to be big things that are drawn out. It could have been something as simple as a woman walking by her and being like, "You go, girl, your outfit is slaying," or like like something like that. Or it could have been something as simple as more conversations between Gloria and Barbie that didn't have to deal with all the stuff that sucks under the patriarchy. You know what I'm saying? That was one thing that didn't really connect with me. Another thing was the topic or the conversation about heteronormative relationships, basically relationships amongst straight people between Barbie and Ken. And at the end of the movie, they make this decision that they can grow and expound separately. They don't need one another. But that doesn't make sense because from the very beginning of the movie, you never once feel like Barbie and Ken are in this relationship. Like it feels as though Barbie tolerates him as a friend. It doesn't feel like Barbie and Ken, like they're together. There's this dynamic couple. It feels like they're two people. He's pining after her and she's kind of indifferent and doesn't care for him. In fact, she's a little annoyed by him. But to show that relationship with them throughout the entirety of the movie just to be at the end and be like, oh, we can be separate things. They were never together. I think if the movie tried to establish that when Barbie and Ken are together, there's like this performance, especially from her, Barbie, of her trying to act like he's her ideal man and that she truly loves him. And then when he leaves, she kind of like her smile drops and she no longer feels performing like she really likes the relationship. If they would have built this dynamic in which it's very clear that when they're together, she's acting like the perfect girlfriend, but when they're apart, she feels more like herself because she truly doesn't like this man. Then they're separating, being like, we can be our own individual people. We don't have to be together for that to work. I think that would have made more sense in the grand scheme of the conversation they were trying to bring up. Because I feel like they were trying to, and this is just my interpretation of the movie, but I felt like they were trying to say, you as a woman do not need a man, or you as a man do not need a woman to be yourself, to be an individual. But they didn't do that to me. They didn't properly make that connection. And in connection to the whole Barbie and Ken dynamic, one thing I hated so much about this movie when it comes to Ken and the patriarchy he brought back because he didn't feel affirmed with his relationship with Barbie is the fact that they play off the patriarchy or the reason men subscribe to the patriarchy as a symptom of not getting a woman's affection. What a ignorant thing to do. And I don't know if this was like intentional or unintentional on the part, and it's just like a side effect of the movie because a lot of things kind of went by the wayside with this movie because the messaging wasn't fully thought out. But the reason men subscribe to the patriarchy isn't because of women, it's because they benefit from it. And a symptom of that is women being put down by it. So when the movie was trying to be like, show that Ken, the reason he brought patriarchy back and he was doing all this was because of Barbie, like he didn't feel loved and affirmed by her, it was just like, what? Absolutely. Like, what are, like, what? I was so flabbergasted. Like, I was just so thrown off by that. No, men do not subscribe to the patriarchy to get women. They subscribe to the patriarchy because they benefit from it. And through systemic implementation of the patriarchy, it has become the expectation that women are supposed to suffer and be to the expense of men. Like, so hated all of that. Like, that just gave me such a big yuck. But in talking about the patriarchy that, or supposed patriarchy that this movie tried to bring into the conversation, in connection, the feminism that it tried to add to this whole conversation was just so one note. And watching this movie and then seeing some TikToks about it, one of the things that I couldn't like let go of was the fact that this movie was, the message of feminism specifically was not made with anyone outside of white women in mind. I know people are gonna be like, this movie is not racial, it has such a diverse cast. I'm gonna get to that. But you can just tell that the way they kind of work through the issues, even in the monologues, was so exclusive, for lack of a better words. Like it's just like it just didn't feel like a lot of things were considered in the topic. And I'm not saying that I expected this movie to be this wonderful tale of feminism and patriarchy or anything like that. In fact, I was not expecting it when I went to go see the movie. But if they were going to cover these topics, they shouldn't have just rubbed it down to the very bare bones. And I saw a lot of people say, like, oh, well, it makes sense in the movie for base feminism to be used because it's explaining feminism to the women, the Barbies that never experienced patriarchy. And I get that in the tone of the movie, but people have to understand when you're covering these real serious topics that do have impact and effect in the real world, you can't just be like, oh, well, it could be based feminism because it makes sense in the world of the movie, and then ignore the fact that what people are seeing, they're going to internalize. What people are seeing, they're going to trivialize. It's too real of a topic to just not think about the real world implications. And there were some real world implications. The amount of men I saw trying to say that misandry exists because of this movie is not something that should be ignored, because guess what? Those men who believe that are men in the real world who will then take that and ramp up their misogyny because they believe misandry is something that actually exists. And topic of misandry, I personally don't believe in a society that's run into the benefit of men that misandry can exist. Are there things that men can negatively experience in the world? Absolutely. I'm not going to negate that fact, but I just feel like misandry as a societal construct doesn't exist. And I think this movie fed into men believing that it does exist. So the feminism in the movie was so one note, and although I didn't expect it to be like this grand explanation, I did kind of wish it covered a little bit more. And it didn't even need to cover it in monologues, just shown more. And back to the diversity point I was making earlier, like I know a lot of people were like, oh, well, it can't be white feminism in this movie because the cast was so diverse. And to that, I always think a good metric to see if a movie is focused from a white lens and white narrative, even with having diverse cast, is asking yourself, would this movie change if those characters of color were changed to white characters? Would anything about this movie shift if these characters were played by white men or white women? And to me, the answer is no for this movie. So I just think that to me, it just proves that this movie really didn't try or have the depth of understanding to really tackle a topic like this. And if I can be so upfront, the fact that there are characters of color in this movie, and never once in any of those monologues or any of the interactions that happen in the movie is their experiences as characters of color brought to the forefront. And no, I don't want this to be like a whole conversation on the racial dynamics of Barbie Land and stuff like that. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying in my mind, what makes sense is why not have those monologues be specific to the characters in which they're speaking to? So there was a plus size woman, there was a dark skinned Barbie, there was a light skinned Barbie, there was the Barbie with red hair, there was like these different Barbies. Right. And I feel in the monologues, they each, whenever they were trying to break those women out using the monologue, they should have done something specific that would have also applied to them real world. You know, like with the dark skin Barbie, they could have said, was, you are going to be more masculinized and more, and it'll be more acceptable to be brutalized because of your dark skin, or something like that. Like, you know, in all those monologues to break them out, just connecting the fact that the way the character looks impacts how they experience the world as a woman. I think that would have been more beneficial. And I'm saying this because growing up playing with Barbies, what my parents, and I'm assuming what a lot of parents did, is they gave us dolls that looked the most like us. Like my parents did not buy us white dolls. And I know a lot of parents of color specifically try and buy their children non-white dolls. Well, from the people I know, maybe that wasn't your experience growing up, but from the people I know, like a lot of my friends had black and brown dolls. Like I remember even like my parents that got me and my sister bootleg American Girl dolls, Journey dolls, shout out to them, childhood. And they didn't have any dolls that were me and my sister's complexion. So my sister got like this really light skin, I think it was Hispanic doll, and I got an Asian doll, because having a doll that's not even represents you, but having a doll that's not white is so important to the development of young girl minds. That's just my opinion. I think it helps with kind of combating some of the complexes that little non-white girls experience, especially in certain spaces, especially in the United States of America. So in my head, watching this movie, I was like, if these dolls are representative dolls in the real world, then it's likely those girls who are playing with those dolls and feel most reflected in those dolls also look like those dolls. You feel me? So having the monologues be specific to how those dolls might actually, or the girls who play with those dolls might actually experience the real world, I think would help so many girls in coming into womanhood be able to watch this movie and be like, I see myself in this, and I feel reflected in it. It's so important, because I feel like in a lot of conversations, it's so quickly ignored the impact of having representation. Like it's so important to have proper and positive representation. And I feel like this movie kind of missed a note on that, and thinking that because they have these people of color within this movie, that automatically makes up for the fact that their message about feminism completely excludes those same people, like completely excludes them from the conversation. And I just think that's unfortunate. When I was watching the movie, that was one of the biggest disconnects for me, was I was watching and listening to it, trying to absorb the message, and it just didn't click for me. I was like, this doesn't apply to me. I, as a Black woman in America, experience something called misogynoir, which is different. It's a branch off of misogyny. And it just sucked that a movie I was so enthusiastic to see was so careless with how they decided to do the different representations that they work so hard to have in the movie, which is, a conversation or a video for another day. But I just think it is interesting. And I do think it lends to conversation about how performative representation sometimes does more harm than good. Because if you are going to have these characters of color and then that character's story completely ignores the fact that they are a character of color, then people who are represented by that character is going to feel it and understand that, oh, okay, so literally you just had this person because you wanted my money to be in the seat to see this character who doesn't represent me in any sort of the terms. Going into the monologues about the characters, I am going to say something that's probably going to give me a lot of flack on this. I hated the monologues, like base feminism aside, the fact that it excluded so many people from the conversation. I just think that in movies and shows, we should always follow that format of show, don't tell. And I know monologues is more of a tell than show, like that's the point of the monologues. I just was not a fan of them. I just I just prefer my movie to show me than to tell me. Like hearing someone explain something to me, it gets my left eye twitching. Like I was listening to monologues and I was like, oh, bro, because I went to go see it with my friend and we were like, at that point, me and her just looked at each other and we were like, would it be a waste of money to just like walk out of the theater right now? Like how far deep are we into it? But we were practically at the end of the movie by the time the monologues came up, so we were just like, you know what, let's stick it out for the end of it. But I was just like, yeah. But another topic that it tried to cover was masculinity, or at least toxic masculinity. I had to look that one up because I did look up like what people thought the topics were in this movie, and that was between the Ken that was with Margot Robbie, and then I don't say Asian Ken, but I don't remember the actor's name. If I remember the name, I'm gonna put it in this video. But like the Asian Ken, for lack of a better term, so sorry, I don't mean to be offensive. And I think that's supposed to be representing toxic masculinity. I don't think so. Like maybe that's not the movie's intention between their dynamic. I kind of hated their dynamic in the beginning because it didn't make sense. We're just getting introduced to these characters and we understand they dislike each other. Why do they dislike each other? It just didn't make sense. Like narratively why they would dislike each other. Maybe because he thought that Asian Ken wanted Barbie, but every Ken has a Barbie, and that was it. Just was confusing. I didn't understand it. It would have made more sense if they were friends or at least cordial before Ken brought the patriarchy back into the Barbie land. And from there, toxic masculinity is represented by men trying to amp up men's more negative attributes or more negative characteristics. Then that would have clicked way better. Them going being cordial to them being like, you don't need that woman, she's trash, you're better than her, you deserve everything she doesn't deserve. That would have made more sense in a conversation about toxic masculinity. Again, it doesn't have to be this big drawn out monologue. It doesn't have to be this big drawn out monologue. It just be simply just saying, she's trash. Like she doesn't deserve you. You're the best thing on this Barbie land. Like they don't deserve us. We're better than them. They're garbage. Like all this stuff. It could have been a simple, just conversational thing that was thrown in there, and I think that would have represented toxic masculinity way better. The topic I felt like was covered was strained mother-daughter dynamics between Sasha and Gloria, the mom and daughter from the real world, who came to Barbie land to help. I'm just gonna say this: criminal behavior on the director or whoever was writing the script part of having a Hispanic woman in this movie covering the topic of patriarchy and feminism, and then not having a single person say machismo at least once. I think it's just criminal. I think that's crazy. But back to the mother-daughter relation, like I feel like it could have been removed from the movie and nothing would have changed. Why did Sasha hate her mom? It's like, oh, I hate mom, my daughter hates me, and then it was like they were cool. Why add it? What brought Barbie to the real world was the fact that the mom was kind of feeling like existential dread and all this stuff. Why not just have that being represented by the fact that she's feeling older because her daughter's growing up and they're not as close as they used to be, without it being like a my daughter hates me conversation? It just wasn't necessary to the plot to me. Like it could have been removed and nothing else would change. The last thing was, I don't even know what this topic or theme would fall under, but it was the fact that after the Barbies got back in power and the Kens were like, can we have power? And the president Barbie was like, we can give you a smaller position. And then the narrator quips, oh, maybe one day they'll have the same amount of power as women do in the real world. Like, you showed us what Barbie Land was like. You showed us that the Kens didn't have any power and they were like inconsequential to the world, and how because they felt inconsequential, they ended up picking up the patriarchy pretty quickly because it gave them some semblance of power. And then to have them go through all that and not show that it's just, you know what? One extreme, other extreme, either extremes isn't the best option. Let's find a solution where we can meet in the middle, and have it be like, you know what? Yeah, we'll run elections. We'll get you guys more. We try something more cool. Like you guys can have homes or something like that. But to have it be like, oh, this one extreme, a matriarchy, which is not how an actual matriarchy would function. Like men wouldn't go by the wayside if women were in charge. Let's be so for real about that. And then having the other extreme be patriarchy, poorly washed down, jokey patriarchy, but still patriarchy nonetheless. And then being like, okay, this didn't work really because then they ended up turning this didn't work really because they ended up turning it around. And to just be like equalism or equality, men and women having equal power, and then that being kind of a nice setting point of the end of the movie being like, yeah, it's better for us to come together and view each other as equals. Instead, they're like, maybe one day they'll have an equal amount of power in the real world. Like, are you mad? Like, what? Again, contributing to the misandry conversations and all that stuff. I'm just like, are you mental? Like, in what sense would this make sense to do when you're trying to cover such a serious topic? Like, why was equality of genders not something that would have been a nice round off point for it? And someone could be like, oh, they're trying to be more realistic and be like, yeah, it takes a lot longer to get power. Yeah, true. But the movie ended on that sour note for that conversation, and it did contribute to real world impact. And now imagine men who saw this movie and decided to treat women poorly. Because let's be for real, media literacy, critical thinking is a dying art form. And so people aren't able to discern the things they see with real life sometimes. And so imagine how many men saw this and was like, well, yeah, we're in charge now, but we can't let women be in charge because women in charge, then we'll be treated as badly as those kids did in that Barbie land. Like, why not end the note off on something more positive? And I'm not someone, I'm be honest, I have a very pessimistic view of the world and of people. But I do think that ending it on a more optimistic note could have helped some of the adults that watch this, and even some of the children that watch this, grow with a healthier mindset of what equality of genders looks like. You know what I'm saying? Also, it was such a missed opportunity not to display internalized misogyny amongst the Barbies after Ken brings the patriarchy back, because internalized misogyny is a direct result of the patriarchy, and they had an opportunity to do so in like small dialogue. In so many other aspects of the movie, they had so many opportunities to really hit these topics and do something powerful with them, and they didn't for some reason, and it's disappointing. But yeah, that's all the topics that the movie kind of tried to handle and did so poorly. But in addition to handling the topics poorly, I feel like there were some decisions made in the movie narratively that didn't help the messages and kind of took the quality down for me. The real world portion of the movie was the roughest part to watch for me narratively. Just watch in general. Like, it was not a hard watch because the movies, like, filming quality didn't go down, acting, the filming quality didn't go down, but like everything else kind of took a nosedive for me because it just didn't feel real. I think when I'm watching this movie and it's covering these serious topics, I expect the Barbie land to be more of this caricature of the real world and people act a little more goofy, because they're dolls. Like, it's this silly, fun world. But then you're having them go to the real world and you're having them cover these serious topics. The real world should be handled with more seriousness. And it's not even really just the real world. It's primarily that scene at Mattel. Mattel didn't look like it was part of the real world. Like, that office right, the background of that looked like it was an adult world. I think Will Ferrell can be a funny actor, but his acting in this was unneeded and unnecessary. Like, I get comedic, but he was comedic at the expense of his character. Because like when I was watching his character, I was going back and forth. I was like, is he a good guy or is he a bad guy? Because when he was super friendly and was like, we love women, I was like, okay. Then he tried to trap her and chase her down and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, so he's a bad guy. And then it comes around to the end and it's just like, it's kind of stuck in limbo where I didn't know if he was a good person or a bad person. So his acting comedically didn't help with that. I don't think it needed a more comedic person. I think it needed a more serious person who played like the straight and narrow, be like, yeah, we're a woman created business run by men and stuff like that. But because it took some of the goofiness from the Barbie world and applied it to Mattel, I couldn't take some of the more serious components that were happening in the real world seriously. And then in addition to that, like having the creator be this ghost, that really kind of, like, I've recorded this video so many times. It's like third time recording this, but like one thing I will always go and spill on is about the creator and how real people interact with her. I don't know. I thought it was like non-physical, kind of like a mental thing, like something happening in the mind that she was experiencing. Like, she was in an empty room, but the creator of the spirit is through the company because they created all this stuff from the ground up, all that stuff. But then Will Ferrell says, oh yeah, her ghost has a floor on the 17th floor or something like that. And I was like, so real people see her? I was like, is this a world where ghosts are real? Like, that just broke the world building for me. And then I had so many more questions. I think something that could correct that was having, like, as Barbie was running to escape, hit her head. And then when she hit her head, she experienced this interaction between her and the creator. And then she had a conversation with her because the creator is part of her. Creator makes up part of her, like, because mothers pass on to daughters who pass on to daughters who pass on to daughters, that type of thing. But no, like, she physically spoke to a ghost in the movie. And the real humans know about it. And no one's like, hey, this is crazy. Like, no one's nothing. I just, that broke the world for me, the world building for me. It might have been unneeded. Besides her interacting in the Mattel headquarters and having that conversation and then interacting a Barbie space warp where she decides to become a human, I just think that it was unnecessary. Maybe it was necessary. I just think that because she was like talking to a ghost, I just feel like she would have hit her head and interacted with the creator and then interacted her again when she decided to become human and be like, that's that beautiful line where it's like, we mothers stand still so our daughters can see how far they've come. I think that would have been more emotionally impactful and resonant to me, in addition to changing out slideshow, random clip art images of women experiencing stuff to stuff Barbie has experienced, showing like not even her experience them in like a third person where we're seeing her body. I mean, we're seeing her experiences through her eyes. I think that would have been more emotionally resonant. Speaking of emotional resonance, this movie puts me through emotional whiplash because I mentioned earlier it went from being like goofy to kind of serious, kind of goofy, and it just kept switching back and forth. Like, I was like, okay, they're handling something serious, and then quickly it would switch to something funny or goofy, and I was just like, there's no transition in between serious to goofy or vice versa. Like, there was no breath taken from going from one to the other. So I just was watching and I didn't know how to feel because I'd be like, oh, patriarchy, oh, they're doing a beach scene, oh, monologues about feminism, oh, narrators talking about don't hire Margot Robbie for this. Like, it just kept going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth to me, and it was hard to sit comfortably watching it with it going back and forth. Like, I think you can handle serious topics and make them funny. Dark humor is a very real thing that I very much enjoy watching. I just feel like it didn't balance the tone of what it wanted to do enough for it to feel emotionally or resonate emotionally with me. Like, I saw people be like, I cried when I watched this movie. I was just watching, I was just like, this movie didn't make me laugh, it didn't make me cry, it didn't make me angry, it didn't make me really introspective. It was just something I did for about 2 hours. So I was just like, okay, I did this with my time, can't get it back. So that's kind of how I felt about it. Some other things I forgot to mention that bothered me about the movie was the fact that Alan could fight. Like, where did that come from? Like, what is that from? Like, they built up all this lore to Alan being by himself, and him fighting just didn't connect for me. And then also, I wish they would have played more into the doll aesthetics outside of like the props, hair, and wardrobe. Like, the storytelling, I wish the narrator would have been a little girl, because little girls have these imaginations and those are the ones who are most likely to interact with Barbie world. And speaking on the narrator, I wish the narrator wasn't there. I wish they would have used like Barbie-esque commercials and catalogs in order to transition between scenes of the movie or to explain what's happening, because I felt like that would have fit better than this random narrator that popped in at random times throughout the movie. I think this movie had a lot of energy and effort go into it, like especially with the marketing and promotion of it. especially with the costuming and prop design and background designs in it. You can just tell that people put a lot of effort into it. I'm not trying to disregard their works. I still think this is a decent movie at the end of the day. I just feel like when you're trying to make a movie that covers so many serious things and you're trying to have it be emotionally resonant with people and also say something like it's the intention is to say something meaningful, you have to be intentional about how you're going about it. Like look at BoJack Horseman, look at Avatar: Last Airbender, look at so many examples of media which are things that can be consumed and it like make people introspective about the world, about these bigger, broader topics that do have impact in the real world, while still making it something that's enjoyable to watch. It's still making something that's funny. It still makes something that's engaging and dynamic and non-harmful. I think because this movie's wanted to keep the audience so broad to make the most money possible, and in turn made the themes and messages as broad as possible, I went into the movie theater and there were children. I would not explain patriarchy and misogyny and feminism to a child in this manner because it can do more damage than good. That's how people end up only focusing on how certain things only impact a small group of very privileged people. It's how people end up only advocating for people that look like themselves. There were men in the audience. And so in watching this movie, how do you think that impacts how they treat women outside of their family? Do you think it benefited them to really think about womanhood outside of the perspective of people that they have a connection with? Women who watched this who needed a little feminism, they might watch this and just was like, oh, another pretty aesthetic to do, because the conversation didn't have enough depth for them to really be introspective. And for the people who have a more in-depth perspective of feminism watching this, but it's limited to very narrow perceptions, do you think this reinforced them to change their minds? Like, honestly, I wish this movie would have been just campy goodness, like a funny little movie with tons of dolls, tons of fun, tons of humor, and just off the walls, like something like Cat in the Hat or something of that nature, where it's just like you kind of go, it kind of goes shell, and you're just here for the ride. That's what I thought I was getting within the first couple minutes of the movie, and that's what I wish I would have seen, because what I was left with left me disappointed, truly. And I hate to say that because I know I've seen TikToks of people being like, this movie really touched something for me, and at least for me personally, it didn't do that. But that's just my opinion. And for anyone who's like, it's just the movie's not that serious, yeah, I'm talking about it anyway. I feel like doing movie analysis or things I think could have been improved in the messaging, especially as it pertains to representation, can help a lot of people, because if it can have one movie director or one actor or someone in the industry be able to watch this and try and make a change that has a more impact or more positive impact, then why not do it? I think things don't change if you're complicit in them being the same. So why not make a video about why I think this movie could have been better and why I think it should have been better and why I think it didn't do what it needed to do or expected to do. Did this movie make $1 billion? It made like a lot of money. It might not be $1 billion, but this movie made a lot of money. And I don't think that making a movie that makes a lot of money should be the end all be all of it. I think it should be a movie that connects people. I think it should be a movie that resonates with people. I think it should be a movie that inspires people. And so that's why I decided to talk about it today. I talked about it so much after, so much later than it came out, because honestly, I think about talking about stuff fresh on the mind makes me a little more biased. Excuse my perspective, but if I can sit down and really think about it, I think it helps with me understanding the conversation I'm trying to have about it. Plus, it's like I do my stuff in my own time. Like I said earlier in this video, like this is like my third time recording it. So I recorded it one time, and it literally, that first recording literally went on for an hour because I kept going on tangents. The second one went on for 2 hours because I was so mad about Gloria and her daughter and how they did the characters of color in this. This one, it's not too long after I edited it, so I'm really happy with what I came up with. Ignore the sound in the background. That's like, I don't know what that is. I just have my window open recording in my dorm room. But let me know what y'all think. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and have a good day. Bye, Barbie.